Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's moving day for me. So this is being pre-recorded, but this is by request. Someone who watches my content a fair bit specifically asked me to talk about this, and then somebody else who is a personal friend, not a fan, asked me about it as well, and it's like, all right. I'm talking, of course, about the MrDethMoth alleged domestic abuse caught on camera situation. And I I'm really uncomfortable talking about this. You can tell by my hesitation. To summarize, a guy was playing a video game. The video game happened to be Fortnite. He was streaming. I say happened to be Fortnite because there's a lot of bad press that's going Fortnite's way. It's like the new Grand Theft Auto in that it's getting blamed for the tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of its player base that happens to be terrible damn people. And they'd be terrible people whether they played Fortnite or not. They'd be terrible people whether they played Grand Theft Auto or not, and so on. But in this case, the guy responded to his wife, asking him to come and eat dinner, followed by throwing some things, mostly in his direction. It sounded like a soda can, either a shoe or some sort of like a basketball or something like that. A cardboard box actually appears in the image. That actually does hit him. And at one point, he does flinch. But then he gets up 3 different times, and you hear him striking her, what sounds like striking her, at least once. She starts wailing, says, something along the lines of people just see that he just hit me in the face. After that happened, he sat back down, got angry at her again, went up. You hear screaming again. We don't quite know. I didn't hear there, but the third time he's screaming the whole time. Okay. And then the third time he gets up, you hear the voices of at least one child, possibly more. One's a daddy, daddy, daddy. You hear one kid say, and then the kids start crying as well. It's disturbing, and there's plenty of versions of it out there. I don't feel the need to show it. The debate surround now, okay, I should say the immediate reaction was people were so horrified that people, I won't even call this doxing, because this was getting his information and sending it to the police, which is quite frankly the right thing to do if you can do it and you see a crime being potentially committed. I say potentially because you don't actually see it. But there has been some debate because of the fact that she did throw things at him before he, took escalated things. And some people say that is assault in itself. And so she's at fault, or at least she's at fault more than him. And when I first heard it described before I saw the video, it's like, yeah, okay. People are still responsible for their own responses to those things, but I can see somebody, kind of lashing out of fear. But having seen the video, he doesn't seem afraid. He seems angry and irritated. And that seems to be what drove his behavior. I mean, the first time, maybe. The next two? Come on. And the fact that it's 2018 and anybody basically subscribes to this idea that the minute someone does something that touches your person, you have the right to get violent. No, you don't. And, this is crazy because having, grown up in a hood and getting all the intervention that hood kids do, and then seeing how the rest of the world thinks about these things, people from the most incarcerated communities in the world don't defend this behavior. They sometimes do it, but they recognize it is a mistake. It is a loss of control. It is linked to anger issues. And this is why I decided to talk about this because, on the surface, these seem to be, reasonable arguments. The problem is the arguments go beyond, well, she's not a perfect victim. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. Okay. People expect, victims of domestic violence to all act like Sansa Stark and just mope and whine and cry and be sad and beg for help. That's not reality. What it looks like in reality is much more like the MrDethMoth stream. And this is what makes it so complicated, is that we have created this myth about domestic violence and what it looks like and what a victim looks like and what a perpetrator looks like. And it doesn't match the reality. A lot of these abusive relationships are codependencies. There's clearly a lot of issues there. I noticed that, and please hear me out before you judge what I'm about to say, because this is not justifying it or making it any better. But what I heard from the way she reacted to being struck the first time, if I had to guess, if I had to put money down, this isn't the first time. And the reaction was somewhat, it was not the shock, stunned. This seems like their pattern. And there was an element of performance to the wail. And that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And that doesn't mean, that she deserved it. It means that these things are sicknesses involving two people. And the thing that gets me is that there were children involved. There were children who were witness to it. She herself was 4 months pregnant. And that's where I just go, nope. No matter what she did, you harm a pregnant woman. You are potentially harming her unborn child as well. And, I'm assuming it's his kid. So because of the effect that stress has on the body and injury has on the body, he is putting his own child, who is a complete innocent, at risk because he got angry at the child's mother. And that is, no matter what she did, the kids don't deserve that. And that's, she has some responsibility in the fact that she is keeping her children in an abusive environment like that. They clearly have problems. In some countries, I wouldn't be so hard on her, but I know that Australia has extremely good services for women in those situations because it was terrible for so long. Now, it's not, it's not a bad country to be in for that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it's a response to this stuff being all too common. But, once the police intervened, there was a protection order issued. I forget what it's called there. But he can't come to the house, he can't see the kids. And because I get the sense that this is not the first time it's happened. I hate to admit this, but as somebody who has been hit myself in the past, in the face, I mean, starting when I was in the 6th grade and a kid twice my size, slammed my head into a brick wall because I was trying to protect my sister, you're stunned. There's this, you don't quite know where you are at first. The reaction is not screaming like that. And I hate that. I know that. That's a bit of an overshare. I apologize. That doesn't make it right. I'm talking about this because of the complexities of domestic assault. And while she, as a mother, does have some responsibility for, granted, this is a huge assumption, but I'm telling you, it's just a basic probabilities here, not beyond reasonable doubt. I am not stating this as fact. But if he has done it before, she kept her kids in that environment. And often those things don't stay with just the spouse. Sometimes they do. But usually as the kids get older, eventually, one of them mouths off and dad turns on the kid too. So any women watching this out there who are in this situation, get your kids out of a situation like that. I know you think you're doing the right thing. Kids need their father, all that stuff. You don't want to replicate family patterns. Get the kids out of that environment somehow. I know this happens more than we want to talk about. And that's why I'm talking about her responsibility as opposed to her blame. Now him, I'm sorry, the defenses of him just don't wash. Anybody who's a gamer, I think, have had that 5 more minutes thing, that fight with a loved one. Often it does escalate to them pulling the plug on your computer or, tossing something at you or threatening to wreck one of your favorite things. Or I know I'm oversharing a ton, but it is a complicated reaction because people who game for, as described, MrDethMoth did, like 6 to 8 hours a day. Even if that's your job, it's not healthy. I hate those extended gaming sessions when I have to do game reviews on a deadline. They're really not good for you. But there's obviously some compulsiveness going on there, and he's avoiding something, or he's self-soothing or self-medicating with a video game, avoiding something in his life. And, like many other addictions, and I should say like many addictions, not other addictions. I personally don't believe in gaming addiction. It's compulsive avoidant behavior. But, like so many antisocial activities, often the first time somebody ever gets help for that issue is after an arrest. They do some alternative to incarceration program, or they do some, in prison program that finally gets them to address what they're avoiding and their defensive anger issues. And, that means the issues are theirs. And he is responsible for what he did because of that anger. And I say this as somebody who, back in the day when I was a kid, gaming was the only thing that kept me going some days. And if somebody got in the way of that, I exploded. I never hit anyone. But, who knows? Maybe if I was socialized male, I kind of was, but, maybe if I was a guy and encouraged to be violent that way, the way many men are, maybe I would have responded differently, but I didn't. It was funny because I grew up in, one of those zero tolerance schools. So I always figured that it wasn't worth fighting because the fight would feel good for 5 minutes, but, the suspension would impact my ability to go further in my life. And, not to toot my own horn, but that's pretty impressive self-control for a 12 or 13-year-old. But, obviously I had influences, notably influences outside the home, that taught me that delayed gratification and gave me another option. And this guy, this MrDethMoth, if you do watch the video, the contempt and the anger, you see how I'm mimicking it? Like it's that contempt face. It's like a snarl. And she wasn't actively coming at him. He got up from the desk. You hear him take more than a few steps, and you hear, right? You don't see anything. And I'm trying to be very careful not to say that you do see him hit her, but that she was far enough away that he had to travel some distance to allegedly strike her. That is not a self-defense. You don't get to argue self-defense under those conditions. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't scared. He got angry. Again, she had stopped throwing things, and he persisted. He continued. That is not the mark of somebody defending themselves. That's the mark of someone just losing it and taking it out on another person physically. Now, I know people are going to be, but she did throw things at him. Yes, she did. And neither of them are particularly mature people. People get traumatized at a certain age, and they stay there. And there are times you hear her, she sounds like she's like 12 or 13 years old, maybe 13, 14, but not even 15, 16 years old. And unfortunately, in a lot of these situations, this is what the police have to deal with. People on both sides of the complaint who are not adults emotionally. They are not adults mentally. They are, chronologically, their birth certificate says they were born on a certain day. They have a driver's license. They're old enough to consume alcohol, but emotionally, they are not adults. And this is very hard for the police because, you have to get into this very murky element of intent, and they're trained to deal with this stuff. But domestic violence is a uniquely ugly thing. And as much as a story has been framed of, look, another horrible thing that happened connected to a video game, I think because we do have these game streams, because these things are public and they're coming from people's homes, we get to see what domestic violence really looks like, not the reductive, oversimplified, morally easy version we see on TV. And I think that's actually a force for good that game streaming has given us. We get to actually see the reality of these things, the reality of people who get violent, the reality of this sort of rage. And this idea that he was probably embarrassed as well, that she was doing this to him while he was streaming. And that's when you get into this thing called aggrieved entitlement. That's the official name the literature uses for it. Basically that there's in this case, masculinity is so prized that some men, not all, some, feel like if they are unmanned in any way, they can use whatever means necessary to reclaim that feeling of the state of masculinity within themselves. It's an interesting theory that doesn't get enough play, but there isn't enough public awareness of it. This is I found out about this through an academic I know sent me the articles. He used his a journal access account to send me the literature, and it was interesting stuff. But that has to deal with culture, and that has to deal with how people feel about their identities and what those identities mean, and how they believe they are expected to act. And these are things that are really important. I think that the gaming community should be praised. And it's funny because the mother of the woman who allegedly got hit was like, I'm grateful to these people. I'm glad they did this. And so many people cared, and most of them were men. She got that, and she understood that gamers did what a lot of people in that situation don't do. They saw something and they took action. They did not brush it off as a private matter, not my business, I don't want to get involved. They were like, nope, this is wrong, we're doing something about it. And good for them. And good for them for giving the information to the police, not just, putting it up somewhere. Maybe they did. Maybe I'm speaking out my ass on this one. If I am, I apologize. But the fact that they passed the information on to the authorities, that was the right thing to do. They acted. This is what they meant in the 1970s when they said the personal is political. Not whether Ivy Valentine gives you like an attack of low self-esteem when you play Soul Calibur. This is what they meant, that back in the day, back in like the 50s, especially the 50s, but the 60s, before things really got going, spousal abuse, notice I didn't say wife assault, spousal abuse was seen as a private matter. You did not get involved. It was not your place. And it was, overwhelmingly women as the victims, men as the aggressors. That has changed because of mainly finances. That back then women, because, they were pushed back into housewife status after the end of the Second World War, women weren't financially independent, not like now. And so now, I'm not going to say it's at parity, but there's a lot more psychological abuse, a lot more, it's much more complicated than it was back then. But in the 70s, they came up with the personal is political. This is not something we should suffer in silence about. This is not okay. This is not a family matter. This is a crime and should be treated accordingly. Of course, another good idea that got ruined by, catchphrase bumper sticker hashtag activism. But that's what it was about. And I think that gamers, in this case, the Fortnite community and the Twitch community, was it Twitch? Don't quote me on that. But they did what you're supposed to do. And the fact that the story is Fortnite player beats girlfriend, arrested, that's not the story. Fortnite community does not tolerate apparent domestic abuse is actually the story. That's what the game did. Because I guarantee you, game or no game, if this guy was hitting his wife, he'd still be hitting his wife. There'd be a different excuse. But because of Fortnite and because of the community and because of the streaming community and the no tolerance policy that gamers have for bullshit like this, he did get caught and he did get reported. And that's the side of gamers that people don't see because they have this ingrained bias that gamers are bad people and games somehow make them that way, and they miss that angle. And so that's primarily, as well as the other stuff, what I wanted to present to you today. This feels awkward. I considered not doing this, but housekeeping, Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. If you like analysis like this, as uncomfortable as it is, as much as you may disagree with something that I may say, we can talk about it in a respectful way without going crazy and getting all angry and emotional with each other. I'd appreciate the support, and thanks for watching.